All right, welcome everyone. I am excited that you're here. So this is a group of admitted and committed MSc students starting this fall. And so it's an opportunity for some of you to get to see, start to connect with each other. You'll recognize some familiar faces, and we've got a series of webinars over the next 6 or 7 weeks to provide you with some introductions to some faculty and staff, and also content and material to keep you excited for the start of the program in the fall. And I am excited that we're starting this first one with Professor Leslie DeChurch. And I have a special connection with Leslie because when I was a student in the program back in 2011 and 12, Leslie was working at Georgia Tech, but there was a professor in the MSc program on sabbatical, and she came and taught our leveraging and networks course. So I got to have Leslie as a professor long before she even started full-time officially at Northwestern just a few years ago. So I'm looking forward to chatting with Leslie today, and also hearing any questions or that you guys have for her as well. So the idea today is to learn more about what Professor DeChurch teaches, her background and interests. I'm not going to read a big long bio of yours, Leslie. I hope that's okay, because that would fill the 30 minutes. That would fill the 30 minutes that we have. But I wanted to start off by learning a little bit more about your background and how you kind of came to this area of study and research, team dynamics, collaboration, network science. I just imagine like a childhood Leslie evaluating her classmates on how well they're working as a team. I don't know if that's how it starts, but where did you get into all of this in the first place?
So first of all, I just want to say thank you, Toby, and Randy for having me today. I think as a faculty member in the middle of a pandemic, we're sort of starved for engagement with our students. And, you know, normally faculty have lots of engagement, and then we kind of go do immersive research in the summer. For me, the summer has been the opposite. And I know a lot of faculty are really looking to connect with our students. And so I just wanted to thank Toby and Randy for having me, and thank all of you for joining today. I feel like I'm cheating getting to talk to you now and have you sort of primed for classes. So thank you for doing that. The story isn't glorious, Toby. So when I was a kid, I was actually a kid who was not very good at anything, right? So I was very motivated, and I wanted to play baseball, but I really couldn't catch or throw, and I wanted to play soccer, but I couldn't kick, and right? So there was like lots of motivation. And then when I was in college, I was a rowing coxswain, and I kind of found my calling in life. So I was an environmental science and chemistry major. I loved experiments, loved lab research, finding answers, cultivating curiosity. But I was most of the day distracted by what was happening. I rowed at the University of Miami, and practice was on Indian Creek at 5 a.m. You had to really want it, right? So 5 a.m., 6 days a week as an undergraduate, and the coxswain is the little person who sits in the boat with a rudder and a microphone. And so you're dead weight in the boat, and your only function is to make the boat go fast based on what you say and when you say it and how you say it. And so I absolutely loved this sport, and that's where I kind of got to take my curiosity and experimentation and make boats go fast. And I had wonderful faculty mentors who said to me, you know, Leslie, you can actually make a career of this. So you can do research and experiments on people. And so this is where the not being very good at, you know, sports or different things that I tried out kind of came into stride, because you realize, wow, I'm not good at holding an oar and making a boat go fast by propelling it, but I can make a boat go really fast by making the whole team work, right? And that was kind of like where I discovered this. So for me, I can't believe it's a real job, I think about teamwork and collaboration every day, whether it's in research, in teaching, in working one-on-one mentoring students. And so, yeah, so Toby, it's not that I really figured it out until college, but when I figured it out, it was kind of love at first sight.
And so, well, then it's a combined follow-up, right? What's kept you doing it? And also, how did that lead you to Northwestern? You've been here for a few years.
So it's been a strange path northward. You know, for me, when I went into a PhD program in psychology, having never, by the way, taken a psychology class as an undergraduate. That was kind of interesting. So I went into a PhD program in psychology and started working with the military on a grant that was funded by the Air Force. Now, this was pre 9/11, so we're back in the late 90s. The big problem that the military was struggling with in terms of leadership was integrating the different branches of the forces. So we had the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, and they spoke different languages. They really kind of had different operational norms. And it was anytime we had to do, at the time we were doing peacekeeping operations, which is code for very slow, very boring, nothing ever happens, but you have to stay alert. And these were interagency operations, and there was lots of issues. Well, in 2001, I was working on my dissertation when I watched the terrorist attack on the Twin Towers in the Pentagon. And at that time, I was working on this problem of interagency cooperation, and I heard one of the senators who was, talking about this, and in one of the early conclusions was, we had all the information we needed. This could have been prevented, but we've built these two really strong organizations, the FBI and the CIA, and they don't work together well. And so at that time, I kind of, I couldn't believe that Team USA had lost to Team very small ragtag group of terrorists, right? I thought this just, as a person who studies leadership in teams, that boat just went really fast and it shouldn't have. Right? Why, with all of the abundant resources. So I completely focused my research program at that time. My dissertation was on interagency collaboration, and I started immediately working with the military in what was then called provincial reconstruction. So we went from peacekeeping to interagency cooperation to, okay, now how do we rebuild after a war a civil society and get the teachers and the doctors and the soldiers who are trying to put the government in place, and how do we get these different people to work together? So that was kind of, I think what I would say, Toby, is the problems are what has hooked me. And so throughout my career, it's been kind of one exciting problem to another. Working with the military, then about 8 years ago, I was at Georgia Tech, and I got the phone call that every professor who grew up in Florida wants to get. And it was, hi, Leslie, this is the head of behavioral health at NASA. We're thinking about going to Mars. We read some of your papers. We're wondering, would you work with us on doing an operational assessment of teamwork challenges in a Mars mission? I almost dropped the phone. I mean, this was kind of one of those moments. I was a kid who grew up in the Space Coast of Florida, watched all the shuttle launches, wanted to go to space camp. This was like the dream problem of a lifetime. So for 8 years now, I've been working with NASA. We have about 5 different projects at any one time. And right now, we're working on the moon mission, the Artemis program. And that's leading straight into, the plans for setting up this gateway. And again, back to where I started with, I wasn't good at myself moving the boat, but making the boat move. And I think with space, it's exactly the same problem, right? I'm not going to make a rocket booster, and I'm not going to solve the radiation problem of sending humans in space for that long. But one of the big risk factors is that the team won't cohere and stay cohered and be able to communicate effectively, both with the crew, but also with different mission support systems that are back on Earth at great distance. And so that's been kind of the puzzle I'm working on right now.
So I don't know, I feel like if we promise not to tell anybody, when are we going to Mars? Can you tell us when we're going to Mars?
So a lot depends on the election.
Oh, okay.
So when Obama was in office, we were going in the 2030s.
Okay.
Then, you know, every president that comes in makes their changes in the space agency. So one of the things people who work in that industry know is that get used to change, right? Because one minute you're going to Mars, the next minute you're going to the moon, who knows where we're going, right? Oh, we were going to land on asteroids too, and that's been scrapped as well. So there's lots of change. The point is, it's not cynical change. It's we build this national capacity, and whatever the need or the goal is, we can do it, right? So it's not a useless redirect. I think it's the 2040s, unless Elon Musk is the one going. So if it's government space agencies building a grand coalition, we're going in the 2040s. But it does depend on, you know, if we were to get a president who's really big on space and says we're going deep space, then has anybody seen the show Space Force on Netflix?
I'm about halfway through. Yeah, it's funny.
So this is a great kind of the sequel to The Office is what happens when you run a space agency. And that kind of, the show comedically highlights the role of space in the military.
Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, so to transition back to Northwestern, about a year ago, I think, because you didn't have enough going on in your world
Yes.
with all of your teaching and all of your research, you were also named chair of the Communication Studies Department. So for everybody, just to provide so the umbrella is Northwestern University, and then there are a dozen different schools, right? The law school, the med school, the business school. The School of Communication is where we all live. And within the School of Communication is the Department of Communication Studies, of which the MSc program is a part, and Leslie is the new chair. Can you describe what Communication Studies does? What's this department for?
So Communication Studies is a weird name, but what's good about it is it's broad. So what we do, we're a multidisciplinary faculty. So some of our faculty have degrees in communication, but a lot of our faculty have degrees in sociology, psychology, political science, computer science, related disciplines. What we do is study important problems in the world that involve human communication and relationships. So my research is one example of that, but other people in our department look at things like how algorithms affect society and affect who meets who. Some people study social media, how we design those technologies. Some people, you're going to hear from Michelle Shoemate in one of these sessions. Michelle looks at how to use technologies to design networks of people who are trying to advance social good in particular areas, mostly in the nonprofit sector. You'll hear from Nashir Contractor, who studies networks in a very different way. How do you leverage your network for your career success? How do you build networks in organizations? And so those are some of the kind of, I think one hallmark of our department is that we are problem focused. So, and we're problem focused in a future oriented way of understanding the most pressing problems. So whereas some communication departments tend to be kind of like, these are our disciplines, our areas, we have them, they're here no matter what. Northwestern is not like that. You know, we are constantly looking out to say what's next. Right now we have a big artificial intelligence initiative that the Department of Communication Studies is involved in around campus, which is, wow, we better have some people who understand humans in this conversation of AI, right? And so I think that's what our department does, is we add the humanistic and the social science background to be able to kind of work collaboratively with people in computer science and engineering, and also across different areas, journalism, for example.
So to keep drilling down then, right? So Northwestern School of Communication, Communication Studies, MSc, and then you teach courses in both the custom and the hybrid program. Can you give us a preview, describe your course a little bit to everybody?
So first of all, I love that I'm the first core class. That has been since I first came to Northwestern. As Toby mentioned, when I worked with him, when I taught Nashir Contractors Leveraging Networks class, it was more towards the end of the program, spring quarter. Since I've been on the faculty at Northwestern, I teach in the fall quarter. So everyone comes in fresh and a clean slate of what can I learn. The class is about collaborative leadership. And by the end of the class, actually probably by the end of the next time, if you come to the content session I'm doing, you'll see teams everywhere. You won't be able to read a newspaper article or watch a movie without thinking about the role of collaboration, the role of leadership in what's playing out in front of you. The class is a rapid prototype session. So no matter how many students are in the class, everyone's on the spot. We do activities. So I've designed my class in the following way, where I've taken a principle, a scientific truth that we know about leading collaboration in organizations, and I've turned that into a module that includes some content, some readings, but it includes a real hands-on activity. And you do the activity, you practice, and the way I look at it, by the way, also as someone who recently was tapped to be a department chair, in organizations, when you make leadership decisions, the timeline for feedback is quite long and imperfect. Maybe you find out 2 years later that you haven't been doing this so well, or maybe people are thinking, well, gosh, that's really not effective when she does this way, but nobody tells you that. And so the philosophy of the class is, let's prototype your leadership. So let's try out what it means to lead a group to be creative. Let's try out how you lead a meeting to get people to make effective decisions. How do you lead a discussion when people have different information, and ensure that you're going to take it in the right direction? And so that's really the philosophy of the class. Is one, it's based on evidence. So things that have a research basis to them, not just things that might be shiny and interesting. But the second is that the best way to learn is to try it. So try talking to your team, try redirecting. And so that's been the strategy. It's also a lot of fun. I think this year has been a lot of fun to teach this, and think about too the remote component, right? So some of the things I taught in the spring also, and we went to the remote format. And one of the interesting things about that was I learned so many things doing these leadership activities online, that no matter how I teach, right? So when we go back to face-to-face someday, there'll be things that I'll do differently going forward that I never would have thought of, right? Because had we not had that. So I think that's been really interesting.
I think what you're describing so epitomizes the philosophy of the whole MSc program, which is we want to teach you things, but it's important that you get a chance to try them when the stakes are a little bit low, right? The stakes are kind of a grade in the classroom and not real jobs, not real money, those types of things, so that, try to remove as much trial and error from out in the real world as possible by getting a chance to practice it at school. And that's been, talk to any alumni from the program, and their experience with the applicability of what they learn in the program is incredibly high and common. So that's great. With the understanding, and I guess to provide a little context, with the understanding that teaching in the MSc program is a choice, right? And so faculty at Northwestern, at the university, all have kind of varying degrees of requirements in terms of how much they're required to teach. Teaching in the MSc program, these specific classes, doesn't meet those requirements. So all of the faculty that teach in MSc choose to do it because they want to. Can you tell us a little bit more about that because you want to piece of it for you, where that comes from?
Yeah, that's really a great question, Toby. I think for me, there's two sides of it, right? One is if you want to make the world a better place and you want to affect people's work life and their satisfaction that they derive from their job, you're only going to do so much of that with research that frankly, a lot of people don't read, right? And don't worry, I'm not going to put any major scientific papers, right? Everything that we do in the MSc program is presented in a way that it's easy to see the translation. How do I take this and use it in my job now? As opposed to, well, that's an interesting theory, but you know, I don't expect you to draw the lines, right? I mean, you have to draw the lines to your life, but you don't have to draw the lines to what the modes of application are. So I think one of them, for me, the motivation is purely outreach. I'm an industrial psychologist. I want to make organizations better. Industrial psychology has a mantra of a scientist practitioner model, right? So our conference is 50% practitioners, 50% scientists. And so I've kind of grown up in a subfield that really promotes interactions. The second, though, I'm sort of hesitant to even admit to this, but it makes me a lot better at what I do, to be interacting, you know, teaching the class on Saturdays. You know, Saturday is a great day because there's no meetings, right? When I look at my calendar, it's open. And what I enjoy, not that I would want to teach all year round on Saturday, please don't misquote me on that, Randy. But for 10 weeks, I enjoy that time. And I will tell you that the MSc program has rapidly prototyped many of the tools, training, interventions that we use with NASA. And so, you know, I develop it, I get feedback on it, we talk about it. And so it's an audience, undergraduates, especially at Northwestern, are brilliant, but they're not working. Right? Their work experience is limited. So I'm
getting some feedback. If you can mute yourself.
It's not mine.
There we go.
Okay, perfect. We fixed it. So what's been great about MSc too is that, you know, the way I define kind of the cohort, it's high potentials, right? So even though people have different levels of work experience and background, everybody's a high potential. You wouldn't be in this program if you didn't have the ambition, the aspiration that you want to be the best version of yourself, right? Nobody gives up. Toby, how many Saturdays?
37 or 8, yeah, Saturdays.
Yeah, nobody does that if they're not striving for excellence. And so having that, working with the MSc group in the HLP and in the CLP has been, for me, developmental as well. So it's not just one direction. It's also, it directly changes how I communicate what I study, how I make it relevant. And I get every class, I end up with new ideas that I had not thought of that come out of the discussion and the engagement with the work.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We have a few minutes left for any questions that any of our incoming students might have for you. So feel free to either type them into the chat or unmute yourself and ask away, but we will leave just a few minutes here for any questions that you might have before we wrap up. Who's going to be the brave person to speak first in front of their new classmates?
I'm glad everyone doesn't have a syllabus. That's usually where all the topics come in.
Toby, I don't have a question for our esteemed faculty here, but I was just going to say, since this is a group of admitted students, it'd be great to connect with people. I can throw my LinkedIn in the chat if people want to connect with me. I'm happy to connect with anybody.
Krish, that's a great idea. So if you see at the bottom of the Zoom, there's participants and then it says chat. And if you click on that, I think if everybody puts that in, it also brings up a little button. So when you see the chat, if you look at the bottom where it says file and then you see ... you can click there and save the contents of the chat. So if people want to type their LinkedIn and information there and then save, although Toby probably has a better solution.
Wait, there's a way to save from the chat. Oh my gosh, learning something
Yeah.
new. Oh boy. And I use Zoom every day, and I didn't know that.
Is that the coolest trick ever?
No, the coolest trick ever is backgrounds that you can
change.
No, I'm completely with you. Or maybe it's breakout groups.
Yes.
Breakout groups are amazing. Okay, so you can save this. So I think that brings up a good point, which is the community within the program is a critical, it's one of those aspects that personally as a faculty member, I have loved, the Christmas party, the receptions, the get-togethers, it links all of the alum who have gone through the program at different stages. And that has just been fantastic. And by the way, I will also love I'm on LinkedIn too.
Yes, it is an excellent idea to link in with each other to build your networks, and you're going to hear more about that next week from Professor Noshir Contractor, who will give you some research to back up that idea. I just also wanted to give my brief testimonial. I'm Randy Iden. For those of you I haven't talked to, I'm the faculty director of the program, and we have an excellent group of HLP this year. And when they were trying to figure out how they were going to adapt to the new reality that we're all adapting to, they wanted to present some ideas to the MSC for ways that they could change the program to be more beneficial to them, given the remote nature of the classes and having to change some of the in-residences and so forth. And one of the first things that the people who were organizing this did was go to Leslie and ask her about the group dynamics that were involved in that kind of decision making. They had some ideas for how they wanted to make sure everybody's voice was heard and included. And Leslie spent some time with them, and it was really helpful and ended up being a fantastically effective format where we had an open discussion and were able to make some quick changes on the fly that have really improved the experience for that group. So what Leslie says, she will back up in practice.
They were great. That was like the final exam for me, is when your group emerges as leaders and collectively leads up. So that was wonderful, Randy. But also that they were presenting it to you. So I think Randy teaches a class on dialogic decision-making right before my class. In the HLP format, we had the order flipped. And so it was a lot of fun to hear, they made a lot of connections.
Right, that was what was really rewarding, yes, is that they were able to use, so the part that came from my class was that they wanted to make sure that they weren't imposing their will on the rest of the people in the group, that because they were the more active members, they didn't want that to be exclusive of the comments of other people. And so they took exercises from my class to use in order to try to make sure that they solicited the data. Then they used the group dynamics to try to figure out how they would organize and present that. And so what they were able to do was to present something that both maintained the individual character of people's comments and also gave us a group proposal, which was easier to respond to than simply having individuals come and ask for their own special exception. So it was great. It was great to see. It was exactly what we love about the MSC, is when people actually recognize the things that we're talking about as more than just theoretical concepts, but actual tools that they can use to get things done in their life.
Thank you both so much. We're just a couple minutes over time. If there are any other pressing questions, feel free to submit those and we can try to get answers back to you. But Leslie is going to be back again in about 3 weeks, delivering some content. So now that we know all about her background and what she teaches, you're going to get a taste. Leslie, can you give us a primer? What's the trailer for what you're going to be talking about in a few weeks?
Yes. So in a couple of weeks, we have a short session time together, but what we're going to do is set the stage for the class. So this is kind of a really cool opportunity. I've not been able to do this. We've had the countdown to coursework, which has been great. But what we're going to do here is really motivate and set the stage for the situations, the impact, and the role of leaders in teams everywhere. So this is my opportunity to change what you think about this summer and get you whatever you might be reading or watching on television or reading in the newspaper. I want to get you to start absorbing and posing questions and wondering. This is a curiosity building session that will help us launch off this fall.
That is great, not to be missed. So that's the schedule for the next few weeks. Is next week, as Randy mentioned, Randy will be interviewing Professor Nashir Contractor. Then in 2 weeks, will be an interview with Professor Michelle Shoemate. 3 weeks from now, Leslie will be back talking about the class in more detail. So with that, thank you again to everybody for joining today. This has been recorded and we'll send it out to everybody who was here and also to those that couldn't make it. And if you have any questions in the meantime, please let us know. Otherwise, thank you again, especially to Leslie. And I hope everybody has a great day. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys. Good to see you.
Thanks, everyone. It's great to meet you.